Hello and welcome to Growth Layer, an interview series that pulls back the curtain on what it really takes to build in health and family. The wins, the pivots, the trade-offs, the behind-the-scenes decisions that shape the journey. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Ashley Chang, co-founder of Sundays, an executive assistant service for work and home. And the goal and intent of Sundays is to help things run smoothly so that parents and moms can focus their energy on what they're doing best and balance work and home life. So Ashley, welcome, and let's dive in.
Thank you so much for having me, Destinee. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise, I'm excited to dive into the origin story and the founding of Sundays. I'm a mom. I don't think I've ever left the workforce outside of some mat leave. And this is a personal and also professional topic for me. So I thought it'd be interesting to start with your inspiration and your story behind the birth and the origin of Sundays. It sounds like there are some personal experiences with your household and your mom as well. So let's start there.
So the inspiration for Sundays was really my own mom. She was a computer scientist in the 80s. And then when she started having kids, she felt like she really had to choose between family and work because there wasn't a lot of support for doing both. And she ended up staying home with us, which I'm so grateful for. But I also know that she missed out on some personal fulfillment outside of the home, and the world missed out on all of the things that she and so many generations of women could have contributed if they were supported in being present both at home and at work. And then personally, I entered the same tech industry 25 years later, working with some of the smartest people that I know. And the further that I got in my career, the more I saw all of these, especially women, really struggling as they started to have kids and balance that with really ambitious careers. And having a career and a family has always been something that I wanted for myself. And so wanted to see what was making it so hard when people entered this phase of life, and was it a problem that I could try to help solve?
So I guess tell us a little bit more about your research and pinpointing that pain, because being in the workforce, being a mom, you could be a first-time mom. It's a multifaceted. There are multifaceted reasons for why we would take a break, for why we would enter. And so I'm curious as to how you nailed this pain point as being one of the drivers with choosing to re-enter the workforce or not.
So I started Sundays before having kids myself. I actually have a 5-month-old now. So now I'm trying to apply all of this research that I did to my own life. But I started by just reaching out to every working parent that I knew and asking them about what it meant for them to balance family and work and what balance looked like. And I came from a product management background, so I'd been building tech products for over a decade. And at first I was like, I'm going to build an app and that's going to solve this problem. But as I was talking to parents, I kept just hearing over and over again that they didn't have enough time in the day. And it wasn't necessarily that they didn't have tools that they were using or systems that they tried to build, but really they worked 9 to 5 at least. They had probably 5 hours of kid time outside of that. And then they were often getting back on their computers doing more work in the evening. And all the things that it took to run a family were just getting pushed to the weekend over and over again. So they had this long personal to-do list that they did on Sundays, and they didn't get to have that time for themselves to relax or to be with their families. And so that's why we named the company Sundays, because our vision is to give people their Sundays back. We do that by having a team of executive assistants. So rather than go this app path, I decided that as I was learning more about families, every family is so personal. The ways that you approach things it's really critical to understand who your family is and what's important to you. And so what we do is we pair families with a human EA on our team who really becomes their right-hand person. And then we do use tech in the background to be more efficient, but that human relationship is really the core of it.
So I guess a couple of things. I started out, even before we were parents, I had this insight that just doing household work just wasn't maybe the most efficient use of my time as I was building my career. And so we had a personal assistant way back in the days before we became parents. My husband thought we were early in that process. And then we became parents, and then we really needed support. And one of the things that we saw was, how do you find the right support? So one, knowing what kind of support there's also having the right vibe or sync, right? Because working, doing household stuff or personal errand stuff, like there is a intrinsic nature to it where things need to sync up. And so I'm curious how you leverage both technology and human matching. And I guess this is tied to what makes Sundays different. But how do you help find the right fit? Because it's almost like the dating service, especially if you're approaching it as a long-term solution, right?
Totally. And that personality fit is so important. And it's something that we've worked a lot on over time. In the beginning, I was like the only EA. And so I was trying to understand, like, what does it look like to work with all of these different types of people, and what information do they need, and what makes them feel supported. And then over time, we've built out a team. We have about 30 EAs on the team today. And so we do a ton of kind of vetting up front to make sure that they have all of the skills that we see families need. But then there also is that really important personality fit. So our team does it very personally. We have an intro call with every person we work with. And then we have kind of this internal classification system where we look at the type of like communicator and style of working that person is. And then we see who on our team we think is a good match. So there's a cool book called People Styles at Work. It has a terrible cover, but it's a really good breakdown and kind of talks about whether people are drivers or more analytical, and seeing like how they kind of like to think and make decisions. And we try to match them based off of that.
Got it. I love that. And how, I guess, from a scalability standpoint, how are you thinking about that as a company? So I guess I really have two questions there is, how do you expect to scale that house matching support, or is it that you're growing inside the work area as well? Because that's also an offering part of Sundays.
We basically are running kind of two business lines here. So one of them is like the pure family support line, and we do this personal matching on that side. And then that support looks more like life maintenance, making sure you like make your dentist appointments, go get your oil changed, planning for birthday parties, planning for big moves, things like that. And then on the other side, we also do work and family support. And our real differentiator there is that we combine them both together. So we work with a ton of people who have usually left bigger corporate roles and started their own businesses, and we'll support them with all of the admin across both. So we have context of, this is a really busy time at work, I'm trying to fundraise, or we're going into the holidays, I need to get Christmas presents for my 3 kids and 20 nieces and nephews and things like that. And so we really treat that to-do list that usually an entrepreneur will have in that family and business side as one list that we can help them tackle, and giving them time back to do what makes them really unique. And we can do more of the operational and admin tasks.
Got it. And are you finding that there's greater demand in that offering between work and family, or are you still, or as a business, the demand and need has been coming in more on the family side of things?
It's really interesting. It's super seasonal, actually, which is kind of cool to observe. We're officially 2 years old now, so we've seen 2 full years of this, and I think we can say that it's a pattern. But so we see basically in the summer and in the end of the year that it's really family focused. I think you probably can relate with your own family, but so much going on with summer camp, with school being out, with the holidays, and so we see a lot of family demand at that time, and then a ton of business demand actually right now, like when school goes back into session, and then in the beginning of the year when people are really kicking off kind of these longer focused periods for work. And then business wise, we're kind of split 50-50 right now in terms of how many clients we have on either side. The business side, we do usually do bigger packages. So we kind of have more of our revenue coming from that side.
I'm curious, in terms of retention, what is that? Are our families sticking around? Is there a sweet spot where they're using the service for a period of time? They leave, they come back, because retention is certainly one of the stickiest topics that our clients are thinking about. So I'm kind of curious how that looks like for Sundays. And I'm also curious, are you getting close loop input on how this is impacting moms choosing to stay in the workforce or not? Is this making a difference? Is it more of a, let me explore and see how it goes?
Yeah, I love both of those questions. I'll answer the retention part first. And that's super relevant because right now we're productizing our services a little bit more. So I think if you're familiar, I'm sure you're familiar with, like, at the early stages, you're just saying yes to everything. And we're like, yeah, we can help you. And especially since we're so operations heavy, we are really flexible. But now we have a lot more data, so we can understand, like, what are the people actually coming to us for, and then who do we expect to be long-term customers versus maybe short-term. So how we're seeing it now on the family side is we do have customers who come to us with just like this backlog, and they really want to help us, our help kind of tackling that backlog. And maybe that usually takes about 3 months. And then they're kind of like, okay, I'm good for now. But then we have other clients where we are really their long-term partner. We take on a bunch of their recurring tasks. Like we'll do meal planning for them every week. And we're the ones who are thinking of like, when did their kid go to the doctor last and things like that. And so that's like the mental load that's the area that we like to be in, where we really remove the mental load and you can fully kind of release some of those things to us so they're not taking up your space anymore. And we see those two kind of differentiators. And then the last one that is really cool is we're getting to be actual like family managers for some families, and that's a lot more involved. But for those families, we'll have like a meeting with them every week where we talk through like, what does the schedule look like next week? Like we know what practices are on which days and who's taking which kid to where. And we're often coordinating like caretakers and stuff like that for the kids. So there's kind of this higher level role that we're getting into too. And I think for all of those, we do have really interesting feedback on whether we're actually able to kind of move the needle on people being able to stay in the workforce. I do think the ongoing kind of recurring management is what makes a bigger difference in you being able to commit that time to work or to have more time that you feel relaxed with family. But we're also happy to kind of get families to a place where they're feeling more stable too with those shorter term projects.
That makes sense. You and I were talking before we started the conversation was that closing the daily household gap would give working moms back 219 hours a year. And so that is the equivalent of 27 work days. I mean, that's in addition to just taking things off your plate, but also the mental load that it lifts, right? So I think it's so needed. And I would expect that it would make a difference in terms of your choice of re-entering the workforce or when you re-enter the workforce.
I totally agree with that. And in the research that I did when I was talking to parents, a lot of times they felt like they had no time in their weekdays for themselves, or less than an hour of time where they were getting to even just like sit down for a moment. And I think that getting that time back is so valuable, and feeling like you can keep going and you can push in these areas of your career.
Yeah. In terms of access and affordability, I know that's something that has come up with friends and families that are in our communities, is how do you balance buying your time back is valuable and buying back your mental workload? But what have you seen in terms of your ideal customer profile with that sweet spot of them being able to afford your services, and then the sweet spot of it making sense for them as a family going back to work and family finances?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would love to be able to go to make it less and less expensive over time. I think that what we do right now is definitely on the more premium side. And most of our clients are at least in kind of like a manager role or above at their businesses. And I think when we see people who are kind of in their middle of the career, it can be really powerful because it gives them that ability to get time back to move up more quickly and have more focused time. And then we also will support executives who want to get that time back too, or have busier schedules. But I think it's super interesting when we talk about this type of support, or just support for families in general, where there's so little systemic support that it does fall onto families to make that decision themselves to invest in it, rather than having more like support from the state or from other areas.
Okay, that makes sense. And it also makes sense that it's evolving, right, in terms of who you're targeting and speaking to. I like the idea of the career growth and fast tracking that with this opening the space to do so. I guess maybe we can bring it back to your founder's journey. So you're a first-time founder, yes? That's what I gathered.
Yes.
Okay. I'm curious in terms of being a first-time founder, and we work with founders who are multiple-time, first-time. I'm curious what empowered you. So there's the personal inspiration. You saw the market opportunity and the market gaps. I'm curious, like if there's a story or what you had to move through to make the leap to become a founder yourself?
It's a good question. And I think I had been working in the tech industry. I was working at Carta at the time, building their VC product line, which was cool. I got to help build it almost from scratch, and we had been scaling really quickly. And at the time I was kind of looking ahead at like, what does the career ladder look like? And I could definitely have stuck to that, but I just wasn't motivated by it. I felt like I wasn't making the impact that I wanted to. And I didn't have kind of the control over my own work that I was hoping to have. And so I decided that I wanted to try starting my own thing. And it took me a while to come to Sundays. I actually left my full-time role without knowing what I was going to do next. I'm kind of a 100% in person, so I couldn't get myself to like start another thing while I had that job. So I left and then worked on a totally different idea, and then it took me about 6 months to get to the idea behind Sundays.
I guess, I mean, that's bold and that's courageous with making that kind of leap, especially into the unknown. So I'm curious if, deep inside you've known you would become a founder, or you feel resonance with this entrepreneurial path. It seems that way. And I'm just curious, if there were clues along the way or childhood influences that had you make that leap, because it didn't sound like it was that much of a conflict or that it brought up that much fear or hesitancy.
Well, I'm a big planner. And so at the time I had like kind of saved enough money that I felt like I could take this risk for a little while. And I felt I was far enough in my career where I was like, I could definitely go back and get a decent job. I know the job market has changed a lot since then, but I think I could probably still get a job. But my dad was actually an entrepreneur my whole life. He makes medical devices. And so I saw him kind of go through many companies that didn't work and a couple that did, and kind of the process of just continuing to try to build something from scratch. And that's definitely always been an inspiration for me, and also seeing the resilience of going through those different companies.
Yeah.
And then my first job out of college I was the first employee at a company that had just gone through YC. And that actually made me not want to be a founder for a long time because I saw how much pressure it put on the founder. I think I actually always did want to, but it took me a while to circle back to feeling like now is the actual time that I'm willing to take on that responsibility and pressure.
Yeah. My parents were both entrepreneurs, and felt like that made me more comfortable in my skin when I decided to become an entrepreneur. But it took me a long time. And I'll also say that my priorities in terms of my career goals has also shifted once I became a mom. Just trying to have space for it all, which is interesting, right? Because it's hard to have a lot of space when you're building your own company. And yet with kids, you need a lot of space. And so you're 5 months in. I'm curious if anything has shifted in this time. And then I kind of want to talk about growth and like next steps for Sundays.
I mean, so much has shifted. It's very interesting to come back to work. And I obviously had been planning for this for quite a while. So I think that I still have the same ambitions for Sundays, but I'm also more realistic about like, what does my day-to-day look like with wanting to have time to spend with the baby and wanting to have time at work, and what are the actual impacts of that, where before I could kind of just keep grinding all night if I wanted to, and I have definitely done that at different periods. Now there are real trade-offs to that, where I would miss the actual time with him, and especially at this baby stage, like he changes so quickly, like every couple of days he's doing something different, and so that time just feels really valuable to me. I'm not sure that I have a clear answer yet, but I'm definitely thinking about like, what does success look like long term, and then what does success look like in my day-to-day, and how do I want to balance those two things?
So I guess what's next? Where I'm curious about is, are there any anticipated or unexpected challenges that have come up in these last 2 years? And the world has changed in the last 2 years quite dramatically with the rise of AI adoption and usage. And so I'm curious as to like, what's next? What are you thinking about in terms of where the company is going?
Our long-term vision is to support as many families as we can in having those meaningful careers and family lives. And so I've always tried to really stick to solving that problem and not necessarily even being tied to my idea of what the perfect solution is. Right now, we still are seeing a lot of resonance with the kind of two product offerings that we have. I think on the business side, it's really been an interesting economic year. And so a lot of people who are going out on their own are thinking about what that means and if they can generate consistent revenue. And that obviously has impacts on downstream on us. So I think this year has been a harder economic year than last year was. Impacts of AI are super interesting, and I'm actually really excited. I think it helps us make a lot of the family support more accessible. And for our team, it helps us be much more efficient. And I'm excited to continue kind of exploring that and using it to help our team be the best they can. But our bet is kind of that personal relationship will always continue to be valuable and continue to make a difference over kind of the time that you have to spend making AI put out something that's as useful for you. And yeah.
Are your customers primarily finding you through referrals, organic, or how are you growing your customer base?
A ton of referrals, and then LinkedIn's been our main marketing channel. That also has changed a little bit in the last few months with their algorithm. So we're working on, it was great in the early stages because it let me kind of be our marketing team on my own. But as we're growing, we're working on kind of expanding channels and having other ways that people are finding us as well.
Do you mind sharing what those channels are for you, or still early stages in terms of defining them?
We're still experimenting, but we have done a lot of kind of building out our actual funnel. So now we have a newsletter we send out and we try to keep people engaged. And then we're looking at other organic places, but also we're having our first event next week. So doing some in-person things where we get to build those relationships with people and make connections. And we've seen that those are really helpful long-term too. So people will come back to us. Like some people come back 2 years later and they have been following for a while from those.
I love events. I love building community. I think the question has always been the ability to scale that. And so I'm wondering, like, is Sundays growing at pace of where you want it to be, or is it growing more organically every month? Like, I'm curious what the volume is if you want to share.
We have been growing. I would say I have pretty ambitious goals, so we're not quite hitting those goals yet. I also went out on leave for 2 months earlier this year, and it's been really interesting where last year at this time, I was doing everything. I was like our hiring, our recruiting, our salesperson, our marketing person, and now we've hired people to do those roles, and we're still a pretty small, lean team, but it's really cool to have their support. And then I think we're kind of just locking in all of the pieces, like making those products more clear, making sure people are we're investing in the right areas, and then me coming back from leave. I expect that we'll be able to accelerate going into this fall season.
Is fundraising on the radar, or how are you thinking about that?
It's a good question. We are actually a bootstrapped company. We raised a really small friends and family round when we first got started, and then have bootstrapped since then, since we are so service-based. And our plan is to stick with that for now, but we always kind of have eyes open for areas that might be more venture kind of investment, better fit for venture investment, where they would scale more quickly. But right now, I think staying bootstrapped lets us have control over how we think about the business and make sure that quality stays our top priority.
I think I think it's so great that you're meeting such a need in the market, especially for moms and parents. And I can't say how much I appreciate your time, your energy, especially with having a 5-month-old. And I'm really excited to share your story and Sunday's story with our audience.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.